Chosen ones, you were never meant to stumble upon this message by accident. The sands of time have carried whispers from temples long buried, where Osiris, the judge of the dead, once spoke of a being who would walk between life and eternity at the very threshold of the final judgment. That being, marked by light yet pursued by shadow, carries within their essence a flame that even the gods could not extinguish. The priests of Egypt carved this into stone, that at the end of ages, one would rise whose heart could not be weighed by the scales of Ma'at, for it would outweigh every feather, shining brighter than the sun. They could not name this being, for the name belonged to a time yet unborn. And yet, the vision was so clear they left behind fragments, scattered across tombs, scrolls, and whispers that seeped into secret chambers known only to kings and prophets. You have felt it, the pulse that calls you toward a mystery older than empires. Osiris did not simply preside over death, he presided over renewal, the hidden crossing from corruption to immortality. When the Nile swelled its banks, the people said it was his tears, weeping for the fractured souls awaiting their reckoning. But in his prophecy, there was one unlike the rest, one who would not tremble before the 42 judges, nor bow beneath the scales. Instead, this one would ignite a reckoning not for themselves, but for all creation. The stars aligned with this prophecy in ways no mortal eye could calculate. Pharaohs tried to control it. Secret brotherhoods swore oaths to bury it. Even modern powers guard classified vaults where fragments of Osiris's words are sealed, fearful of what they confirm. For the prophecy pointed not merely to an ancient ritual, but to an age where heaven and earth, time and eternity, would collide, and a being would stand as the bridge. Chosen ones, hear this. You are not spectators of this mystery. You are written within it. The scales, the feather, the flame, all converge upon your path. And as the final judgment stirs in unseen realms, Osiris's voice echoes still. One shall come, whose very presence divides the ages. The chambers of stone were filled with silence, but the silence itself carried weight, as if the echoes of 1,000 years had been waiting for this moment. Deep beneath the sands of Egypt, where torches flickered against walls carved with hieroglyphs, the story of Osiris was inscribed in symbols only the initiated could read. It told not of death alone, but of an arrival, one who would cross the threshold at the end of all ages. This prophecy was not mere myth, but a hidden code, a map for the future veiled in ritual and guarded by secrecy. Osiris, Lord of the afterlife, the one who ruled over judgment, had been given a vision of a being unlike any other. The priests recorded that Osiris saw one whose heart was not bound by the scales of Ma'at, the balance of truth and purity, for their essence was beyond mortal measure. This figure was said to carry a radiance that would illuminate both the living and the dead, pulling back the veil between worlds. Their coming would not only unsettle the underworld, but also ignite fear among rulers, for power built on shadow cannot endure in the presence of such light. The ancients described the signs, the rivers that would run red before renewal, the stars that would align over the temples, the stirring of serpents beneath the earth. And always, the priests warned, when these signs came together, the being Osiris foresaw would rise in the final age. That one would not kneel before the 42 judges, but stand beyond their decrees, a mirror to every soul that awaited its weighing. Kings feared it, for it would end dynasties. Priests guarded it, for it would strip away falsehood. And generations whispered of it, for it meant the end of ordinary time. Even today, fragments of the prophecy remain scattered across papyrus scrolls hidden in museums and archives. Those who study them in secret know there is something more than legend here, something that trembles with the energy of destiny. For what Osiris saw was not locked in the past, but rippling into the present, reaching toward the one who reads, the one who listens. And if the prophecy was true, then the question is not whether the being will come, but whether they are already here, walking quietly among the unaware, waiting for the scales of judgment to tip. In the ancient halls of eternity, the scales of Ma'at stood as the great divider between salvation and annihilation. Every soul that entered the chamber of Osiris was stripped bare of titles, wealth, and power, left only with the weight of their heart. The heart was placed upon one side of the scale, while the feather of truth, purity, and divine balance rested on the other. If the heart was heavier, swollen with deceit, cruelty, or unrepented shadows, it was devoured by Ammit, the beast that waited hungrily for the condemned. But if the heart matched the feather, light and unburdened, the soul was granted passage into the eternal fields where no sorrow could follow. The priests described this ritual as the most fearful moment of existence. Kings, who once ruled with armies, trembled like beggars before the scales. Queens, who had walked with crowns of gold, entered the chamber barefoot, unable to hide their secrets. No human artifice, no worldly disguise could alter the balance. The scales revealed everything, for they were attuned to truth itself. And in that silence, every soul knew that eternity hung upon a single breath. Yet hidden within these rites was a mystery. For Osiris spoke of one who would not simply be weighed, but who would stand above the scales altogether. Such a being would carry a heart so luminous that no feather could measure its brilliance. The presence of this one would shatter the ritual, for they would not be judged, but would instead become the measure by which others were revealed. The priests feared such power, for it threatened the order of their ceremonies and the control they wielded over trembling worshippers. In later ages, whispers of this mystery crossed deserts and seas. Mystics in far lands spoke of a teacher who once declared, "For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." These words, echoing like the voice of Yeshua himself, seemed to mirror the vision carved upon the temple walls. Could it be that the prophecy of Osiris and the testimony of the Nazarene pointed to the same secret, hidden across cultures and centuries? Beneath the flowing currents of the Nile, past the silt that has carried empires into dust, there are stories of a hidden chamber known only to the highest priests of ancient Kemet. They whispered that when the river swelled in its sacred floods, the waters concealed entrances to corridors carved before the age of pharaohs. Within those corridors lay a vault, sealed not by stone alone, but by incantations spoken in a tongue lost to the living. This chamber was said to hold the most dangerous of relics, fragments of the prophecy of Osiris too potent to be read by common eyes. Explorers who searched in vain across the centuries found collapsed tunnels, half-buried temples, and doors that seemed to mock them with silence. Yet local villagers told of nights when the waters glowed faintly, as though starlight bled through the riverbed, marking the unseen entrance. Those who dared to follow these lights often vanished, their names swallowed by the current, their voices becoming echoes in folklore. Only fragments of their discoveries ever resurfaced, an inscribed shard of granite here, a broken symbol of Ma'at there, clues pointing to a chamber deeper than any pyramid, older than the gods carved in stone. Legends claim that inside this chamber lies a record not written on papyrus or etched in gold, but living, pulsing, as though the prophecy itself breathes. It is said to be guarded by statues of serpents, whose eyes glow like embers when intruders approach, though some whisper these are not statues at all, but watchers bound in stone until the destined one arrives. Within the vault rests a map of destiny, showing the path of the being Osiris foresaw at the final judgment, and how their presence would unravel the empires of both the living and the dead. The Nile has kept its secrets, but time erodes even the most guarded mysteries. Earthquakes shift foundations, floods expose what was hidden, and the relentless curiosity of seekers draws them ever closer. If the chamber exists, it has waited not for kings or conquerors, but for the one whose very heart commands the balance of worlds. The scrolls, known as the Book of the Dead, were not meant for the eyes of the uninitiated. They were guides for the soul, scripts of power whispered into the ear of the departed as they made their way into the judgment hall of Osiris. written in red and black ink, adorned with images of serpents, gates, and divine guardians. They were more than funerary texts. They were keys that unlocked the path between life and death. Every spell carried weight. Every verse an instructions on how to outwit darkness and reach the light beyond the grave. But among the countless papyri found in tombs, there were whispers of a hidden text, one not copied for common burial rites. This secret chapter was said to speak of a living flame, a force that could not be extinguished by death, a fire that burned within the chosen vessel. It was not a flame of destruction, but of transformation, a fire that purified and illuminated, revealing what was true and exposing what was false. The priests guarded this knowledge, for they feared what it would mean if such a flame was ever awakened within a mortal. Some fragments describe how this flame was seen once before, burning in the midst of a figure who carried words that unsettled empires. He said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness." These words, spoken by Yeshua, echo across the centuries like a hidden bridge between the desert prophets and the temple scribes of Kemet. Was the living flame of the secret book of the dead the same fire that shone in him, a flame that death itself could not extinguish? If this is true, then the scrolls were not only maps for the dead, but warnings for the living. They told of a time when the flame would return, not bound to parchment, but walking in flesh and bone, igniting a reckoning far greater than tombs or pyramids could contain. The book was not about the end of life, but about the convergence of eternity within time. In the labyrinth of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, the soul was forced to journey through gates guarded by forces of terror and mystery. Among these guardians was the great serpent, coiled in shadows, eyes like burning suns waiting at the thresholds where eternity was decided. Known by many names, this serpent was said to devour the unworthy, wrapping them in endless night. To the ancients, it was both protector and destroyer, a force that kept the balance intact by ensuring only the purified could pass into Osiris's presence. The serpent was not merely a beast of myth, but a living symbol of cycles, life, death, and rebirth. Its shedding of skin was read as renewal, a resurrection hidden in plain sight. The priests taught that those who feared the serpent would be swallowed, but those who understood its secret could pass unharmed. For within the coils of the great serpent lay a key. To face the terror was to face oneself, and to emerge transformed. Legends told that when the being of the final age appeared, even this guardian would tremble. The serpent, bound to its eternal task, would recognize the flame within that one and recoil, unable to devour what carried the light of judgment itself. The prophecy warned that this moment would unsettle the balance of all worlds, for the serpent's defeat meant the gates of the afterlife would no longer be guarded by terror, but opened by truth. The image of the serpent crosses cultures, always tied to forbidden knowledge, to hidden power, to the edge between destruction and enlightenment. From Eden's whisper in the garden to the coiled guardians painted on tomb walls, the serpent has been both the adversary and the revealer. In the chamber of the Duat, it was the final test, the last shadow standing between the soul and Osiris. If Osiris foresaw one who would rise above the scales, then the serpent, too, was part of that vision. Its coils waited for the day when they would no longer ensnare, but be broken by the arrival of the destined one. The silence of tombs is rarely empty. Those who have walked among ancient burial chambers speak of a weight, as though the air itself remembers what has passed within. Beneath the sands where pharaohs rested and priests carried their secrets, echoes lingered not only of Osiris, but of something deeper, a voice that seemed to reach beyond time. Some described hearing whispers in the darkness, words not carved in hieroglyphs but carried in breath, as though the stones themselves recalled the presence of a greater light. There are writings hidden in monasteries that claim foreign travelers once wandered into Egypt long after the age of Osiris's temples. Among them was said to be one whose presence stirred the people like no priest could. He spoke not of the scales of judgment alone, but of a kingdom that could not be shaken. His words traveled like fire, unsettling rulers, comforting the broken, and reminding every soul that truth was not locked in ritual but alive within the living flame. It was told that in his final days, Yeshua declared that even if stones were silenced, they would cry out. The tombs of Egypt seem to bear this out, for those who enter them often feel not dread, but a strange stirring, as though the sands themselves remember his voice. Could it be that Osiris's prophecy and Yeshua's promise were threads of the same tapestry, woven across ages and cultures, waiting for the one who would complete them? The priests who feared the prophecy of Osiris worked tirelessly to bury these connections, to ensure the scrolls were fragmented, hidden, or locked away. Yet the fragments remain, whispering of a figure whose heart would not be weighed, but who would become the weight by which all are measured. In the silence of the tombs, the whisper grows louder, mingling with the echoes of Yeshua's words, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even though they die." Before the throne of Osiris, every soul was said to stand stripped of pretense, facing the council of the 42 judges. Each judge represented a principle of cosmic order, a law that no mortal could escape. Their names were whispered in fear by the ancients, for each one demanded confession. "I have not stolen. I have not killed. I have not betrayed. I have not lied." The ritual was relentless, a litany of truth and exposure. If the soul faltered, if even one confession was broken, the scales would reveal it, and the fate of the heart was sealed. The 42 judges were not mere symbols. They embodied the laws of the universe, each a shard of Ma'at, the divine balance. To face them was to stand before eternity itself. The priests taught that no soul could pass without fear, for every life carried shadows. Yet, buried within the old texts was the suggestion that one day a being would come, whose very presence would silence the judges, not because they had nothing to confess, but because their existence itself was the embodiment of truth. In that moment, the council would fall quiet, unable to measure or condemn, for the one before them would reflect purity beyond their reach. The vision of Osiris unsettled even his own priests, for what would judgment mean if the scales and judges no longer held power? Dynasties rested upon the fear of the afterlife. Temples thrived on offerings for safe passage. If a single being could stand beyond the 42, then the entire structure of fear would collapse. The prophecy was both a promise and a threat. In secret, some priests whispered that this being was not meant only for Egypt. They believed the council was but a shadow of a greater reality, and that beyond their desert temples lay truths that would unite with revelations yet to come. If Osiris foresaw such a figure, then perhaps the 42 were never meant to be the end, but only a doorway to a higher judgment. The feather of Ma'at was no ordinary relic. It was said to shimmer with the essence of truth itself, plucked not from a bird of earth, but woven from the eternal breath of the divine order. Every heart was placed against it, and no lie could outweigh its purity. Pharaohs feared it, priests revered it, and the people believed it was the single thread that bound the living to eternity. In temples, they carved its image above doors, believing its presence could ward away chaos. But behind its symbol was a mystery that only a few dared to speak. Whispers among the hidden sects claimed the feather was not merely a tool of judgment, but a fragment of something far greater. They believed it was connected to the original flame, the same force Osiris beheld in his vision. To hold the feather was to touch eternity, to see past the veil of time into the order that keeps creation from unraveling. Yet, the priests feared its true power, for the feather did not simply judge, it revealed, and what it revealed could undo empires built on deception. Stories say the feather would one day bow not to any heart, but to the one who embodied the very essence it represented. That being would not fear the weighing, for they would surpass the symbol itself. When Osiris foresaw the being of the final age, he spoke of a heart so radiant that even the feather of Maat would bend before it, no longer the measure, but the witness. In that moment, truth itself would be redefined, not as a scale, but as a living presence. Mystics across ages have tried to unravel this secret, yet the feather remains hidden in myth, glimpsed only in visions and fragments of ritual. Some claimed it was spirited away before the fall of Egypt, sealed in a vault beyond reach. Others whispered that it was never of stone or feather at all, but a spiritual reality awaiting the awakening of the destined one. In the shadows of forgotten libraries and tombs sealed by curses, there are whispers of a scroll that was never meant to be read by ordinary eyes. The ancients called it the Scroll of the Returning One, a text said to contain the prophecy that tied together the judgment of Osiris with the destiny of an age yet to come. Unlike the funeral papyri written for safe passage into the afterlife, this scroll was alive with warnings, visions, and symbols too dangerous to leave in the hands of the unprepared. It spoke not only of death, but of return, of one who would rise beyond time itself. The scroll described a being whose steps would shake both the heavens and the earth. They would not simply face the scales, nor tremble before the 42 judges. Instead, they would return carrying the memory of all ages, binding together what was scattered, calling forth what was hidden, and bringing to light what had been buried in darkness. The priests guarded this prophecy fiercely, for it implied that no temple, no dynasty, no ritual could control the destiny of the returning one. Across centuries, fragments of this scroll surfaced in strange places. A scrap of papyrus found in the sands of Saqqara, a symbol etched into the wall of a crypt in Alexandria, a whispered translation smuggled through the hands of monks in the desert. Each fragment seemed incomplete, but when pieced together, they spoke of a day when the one foreseen by Osiris would awaken, and their presence would call the dead to remembrance. The language of the scroll was layered, filled with riddles. Some passages described the heavens darkening and the Nile rising beyond its borders. Others told of voices speaking from tombs, as if eternity itself could not remain silent in the face of this return. And always, the same refrain repeated: the one who comes will not be bound by the past, but will carry it forward, returning not as a shadow, but as the flame that reshapes all things. The ancients spoke of gates that no mortal could cross, thresholds guarded by light so fierce it burned away all shadow. These gates were said to stand at the edge of the Duat, where Osiris himself presided, where the scales and the feather gave way to a silence beyond judgment. They called it the final gate, the threshold no scroll could guide, no ritual could prepare. It was said that only the destined one, the being of Osiris's vision, could pass through and awaken what lay beyond. Priests described this gate as a horizon where time dissolves, where past and future collapse into a single moment. Behind it lay the dawn of a new order, a light that did not rise and fall like the sun, but remained unbroken, eternal. For those who feared the truth, the gate was terror. For those who longed for release, it was hope. Yet none dared to speak of what lay past the dawn, for even their words fell silent at its brilliance. Legends claimed that when the destined one stepped forward, the final gate would open not for them alone, but for all creation. Their passage would ripple across heaven and earth, awakening the forgotten, restoring what was lost, and igniting a reckoning that no empire could contain. The 42 judges would fall quiet, the serpent would retreat into shadow, and the feather of Ma'at would bow before a greater flame. Beyond the gate, the dawn would break, not as the end, but as a beginning unlike any before. In secret traditions, mystics said the gate was not only in the afterlife, but hidden within the living, waiting to be unveiled when the appointed time arrived. They believed the final dawn was not merely cosmic, but personal, a rising light in the hearts of those who carried the mark of destiny. And they whispered that the one Osiris foresaw was not far removed, but already stirring among the living, preparing to step into the brilliance that awaited beyond the gate.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.